but a lot of people assume that during a Saturn return, that Saturn is the loudest voice. I'm not saying that Saturn return isn't significant, but I'm saying the way we treat it, it's as if it's the most important thing. So this is a conversation I'd like to invite everyone to be a part of, because this is really what this workshop is about. But it's really about understanding how transits and progressions work.
Well, during just based off of the timing of it, if the Saturn return is happening at around 30 years, that's also the same time we know that the progressed sun is going to be making its first aspect to itself at the same time. Right?
Yeah. So that's part of what I'm saying, is a lot of what we attribute to the Saturn return. I'm saying the Saturn return is real and it's part of the story. So when we're talking about Saturn return, lunar return, we are talking about a biopsychic script. So it's, and for conceptual purposes, it's a useful idea for that reason. The biopsychic script. The significance of that is that we all go through these rites of passages around the same age. So there's something deep, there's something universal about them. So they are important, but the point I'm trying to make is they're happening inside, and often inside of a larger context. And if you only focus on the Saturn return, you miss the context. So it's a Saturn question. So to answer the question, we have to really have a deep understanding of what Saturn is all about, specifically in the context of a human lifespan.
Well, it's part of like the maturation process.
Yes, that's it. Exactly. Boom. Maturation. So the maturation process is something that happens over and over and over and over and over. We're always maturing. We are always in a process of maturation. And the deeper significance of maturation is it's the becoming who we're meant to be. It's that constant stepping up to manifesting into reality our potentials. Right, that's what maturation is. When a plant matures, we see the potential in the little baby plant, and we just have to wait for the potential that we know is in there to manifest. So we say it matures. Right. So I specifically talk about Saturn bringing into physical manifestation the potential. Right, when someone's a kid, you talk about potential. When they become an adult, right? Right, you got to get out of the house and go make that potential real. And so, keep it. I'm keeping this in a fluid spiritual place, because that maturation thing can be applied to anything, to our spiritual life, to our relationship with other people. Right, it's the coming to fruition, the coming into manifestation of the potential. If we're talking about a maturation cycle and we're talking about a lifespan, it's kind of that we get the first, the second, and usually most of us get into the third. So we can see there's a first maturation process, there's a second maturation process, and there's a third maturation process, all contained inside of one human incarnation, at least in theory. So we have maturities inside of maturational processes inside of maturational processes, right? And the other part of this that I'm attempting to stress is about bringing into physical manifestation. Why do you guys think I'm stressing that in relating to this conversation?
The Saturn's about reality.
Well, and because all of it is like the physical manifestation is where life's taking place.
No, 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 no. Kind of
I'm
close.
getting the pull of like you become the waterer of that plant, like that evolutionary process of the patience needed, and now you're the grower and the water, the dedication that takes to grow is within you, maybe at that age.
That's conceptual and idealistic. I'm not saying it's not accurate, but I'm trying to bring this down to earth. Right? Because if we're talking about Saturn, we shouldn't be so freewheeling. There should be something heavy about it. Right? And we're just talking, we're avoiding the heaviness.
It's hard ass work to step into the discomfort, the new discomfort.
Of course, but what I'm going back to this idea of something coming into physical manifestation.
The houses?
So, okay, when I'm young, okay, and someone says, "What do I want to be when I grow up?" You know, right? I kind of just say whatever, right? I don't know, just whatever, right? Superhero, a fireman, a policeman, okay. And when I'm 7, okay, when I'm 14, I've lived a little bit more, so right, I'm getting closer to having to really answer that question, right? And I keep getting closer and closer and closer and closer, right? Until I'm grown up now. I'm not going into being instructive. I'm just trying to get us to contact and feel Saturn, right? Not trying to come up with answers, not trying to give advice, because the answers and the advice to me that comes from when you truly have a relationship with Saturn. And so when you're looking at Saturn in the chart, Saturn's talking to you and you're like, oh, that's interesting. And you're putting it into context of what the person is telling you, and you're giving them some useful information to help them appreciate the maturation process. But the first version of the maturation process is, again, comes from the sitcom, from what was given to us. You know, the parents telling us we have to grow up and we have to be mature, and right, and they're telling us what that is. Right? So how many people, show of hands, not, and it's not everyone, but it's a lot of people, okay? Right? They get into their early 30s and they realize they're not themselves. They are who their parents or their culture made them. It's real, right? It's right. And the reason they can see it is because it's who they become. It's come into physical manifestation. Saturn is about the maturation process. That's why the images of Saturn, it's the Grim Reaper, right? Because when the fruit is ripe, we gotta cut it off the vine and eat it. Right? And once you cut it off the vine, you can't put it back. Again, the baby being born, right? You can imagine Saturn severing the umbilical cord. It's real, right? That's the maturation of the pregnancy.
And so, like, consequences, not consequences in a negative sense, but consequences in like the results of actions.
Yes, that's more set. That feels more like Saturn. Yes.
I feel also that, like, over time, obstacles that I've met with that thwarted my intention completely, retrospectively, were lessons that I perhaps received from Saturn to show me that that was not the path that I was supposed to go down.
Yeah, that's true. But Brian just said something that hit a nerve. We might not have sensed or been consciously aware of the nerve it hit, but something he just said hit a nerve.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. I just think of like obstacles as Saturnian.
Obstacles are Martian. Obstacles
really?
Are yeah. Yes. Yes. I think it's better at this point to think of obstacles as being, because when we think of obstacles, we think of overcoming obstacles. We don't think is waiting them out.
Right.
So we have to use the Martian energy to break the obstacle or to
Overcome
get around it,
yeah,
over
exactly.
it, or
Yeah.
however we deal with the obstacle. Where the Saturn energy is like whatever actions I took, they have results.
Yeah.
And so the results, and the word I'm using is consequence, but sometimes the consequence is exactly what we wanted, right? So it doesn't have to be a negative thing, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. But if I perform an action, there's going to be a result, and the result of that action is real, and then oftentimes it's permanent.
Yeah, that's closer to Saturn. And so hopefully we're starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable. Otherwise, we're not really honoring Saturn. You know? To me, my favorite Saturn word is depression. You know?
Depression.
Depression. Yeah, depression.
Depression.
Yeah. And I have pity on anyone who's never felt a real depression. You know, because to me, in order to make a strong response to Saturn, and this is just my opinion, in order to make a strong response to Saturn, we have to be able to tolerate depression, not avoid it, tolerate it. Right? Tolerate the reality of the consequences of our actions. Saturn, right? They say Saturn is cold, hard reality, cold, hard reality. Saturn is the planet of winter. Right? And right, the people who saved their food, who saved their nuts when winter came, you know, they were good. The people who were having a good time didn't save their nuts. Winter came, the cold, hard reality, right? They can blame other people, but the cold, hard reality is they're hungry and they're cold. Right? And if they survive, okay, I bet you next year they save their nuts. Right? They were able to tolerate the depression, you know, but if they were blaming everyone else and stealing other people's stuff, right? Chances are next summer they're not going to save their nuts, right? They're going to be in the same predicament.
If they didn't take responsibility for the position they were in,
Exactly.
right? They blame everybody else. Oh, I'm here because of you and because of that and this other thing, as opposed to I'm here because of me. Okay, and then once a person takes that responsibility, it allows them to change or adjust the next time that a similar situation shows up.
Well, or we might say that's the maturation process. Okay. All right.
Is taking the responsibility is the maturation process.
Whole thing is the maturation process. But if you don't take
Okay.
responsibility, you don't get the opportunity to mature or grow or learn or whatever words you want to say. Okay. When we talked about Saturn, it's about facing reality, right? Grow, right? Because when you're a kid, right, you get away with stuff. But once you're not a kid anymore, you're tried as an adult, right? You have to deal with the reality of the consequences of your choices. So we can think of in a Saturn time, right? The good advice to someone, okay, is take a good hard look at your current circumstances as they're showing up, and especially the ones that feel heaviest. So what we're saying, this is a Saturn time. Okay, so Saturn is there. She's at a phase in her life. This is the other part, the biopsychic script. She's at a phase of her life where she's entering into elderhood. Right? That just sets the stage. The process of someone entering into elderhood. That's one stage in a journey. So in order to really give it justice, we have to appreciate the journey. And we also have to have an image of what it means to be an elder. And that's a personal image. I mean, there's a lot of different ways someone can go depending on their culture, their background, relationships, or whatever, right? But there's so many beautiful images of the purpose in the larger scheme of things of elders. And we could say this to a certain extent is the pinnacle, at least in this earthly incarnation, of the maturation process, right? Something's been cooking for a long time, right? You want to see, right? This is other part of Saturn, right? And I'm seeing this with my mom and other people my age, their parents, and it's kind of depressing, okay? That for better or for worse, whatever society allowed you to do or didn't allow you to do, whatever your partner allowed you to do or didn't allow you to do, whatever your job allowed you to do or didn't allow you to do, whatever choices you made, they are starting to catch up with you. Again, I see it in my mom, right? Her surgery, it was like, whoa, right? Or Alzheimer's, right? People spending their whole life not wanting to see things, not wanting to deal with things, not wanting to think about things, okay? If you do that over and over and over and over again, right? It catches up with you. You know, I think about this, Linda, when I think about Steve. You know what? Sometimes when and Steve is my image of an elder. You know, he's an old person that I want to hang out with. You know, always dropping wisdom and knowledge, even on accident. You know, so and I think of like I hear him the way he puts things together, and like my jaw's on the ground, and I'm like, how is he doing that, right? And then the image comes, right? Year after year after year after year after year after year after year, right? All of that effort he put in to mastering his craft, it caught up with him, right? So the highest expression of Saturn is mastery. Mastery. Mastery, right? To me, the mastery of something is the maturity of our potential. But the long maturity, the 3-cycle maturity, right? And sometimes it just takes us, as we move into the third Saturn return, right? It's this moment of reflection, right? It can be a heavy thing, but it can also be a positive thing, right? What in my look around the life, what has physically shown up in my life, right? Because it's giving us information, right? It can give us information about what we don't want, but also it gives us information about, right, where we have attained some level of mastery and where we, as elders, where we do have something to give back, to contribute. So now we're, going through the 3 Saturn cycles, right? The first cycle we can call youth, right? Youth. And I think like for this cycle, when we're born, we're a baby, right? We're a baby youth, okay? And then we get our teenage years, right? Upper teenage years. Then we're a mature youth, right? We're an adult youth. And then as we get in our 20s and towards our late 20s, we're an old youth, okay? And then when we cross over the Saturn return, we're a baby adult. So like these maturation processes inside of maturation processes. And so when you think of what is the hoped for end result, mature result, what is mastery of youth? No? Okay, I go back to the image, talk to a 7-year-old. What do you want to be when you grow up? Right? A 7-year-old, it's a hope, it's a dream, it's a wish, right? Right? And if it's pure, right, what we hope for is that when they get to their first Saturn return, something of that hope, of that wish, of that spark is still alive and ready to be made, at least to some extent, manifest in real. Ooh. Okay. And again, if we cross that bridge and something is made manifest or real, okay, again, the baby adult, now we have what Steve calls life's long middle, right? The adult phase, right? And if we have something, right, some of that seed crossed over and is starting to take root and become real, and we're putting energy into that, putting energy into that, all right, and we spend that middle part, right, working on our mastery, right, putting our effort in, then we hit that second Saturn return, okay, right, we're baby elders, right, in this stage of appreciating all of the stuff, right, and thinking, how can I give back? Or whatever your image of the elder is.
So Ricky, Why are you showing us Salin's progressions here?
Oh, so yeah, the backstory here is that what we're looking at is her Saturn return, her second Saturn return. But
Right.
my point is when we think of Saturn return, people tend to focus only on the Saturn. And the Saturn is part of her maturation process. So that's the story I'm telling. If we're seeing her as an elder, for better or for worse, again, the definition of elder is whatever you do catches up to you for better or for worse. If we're seeing her as an elder, right, during her Saturn returns, our attention is going to go to her 10th house because that's where the natal Saturn is,
Right.
right? And not only her 10th house, it'll go to the aspects that the Saturn makes, right? Because once her Saturn maturation theme has everything to do with her Saturn by sign, house, and aspect. So if we looked, right, even when she was 20, right, we just did a deep dive on her Saturn, we could create a sketch, right, of potential how she could be potentially when she gets older, as she becomes an elder, what that looks like, right? Again, we could draw a picture of it based off the different pieces, but it would just be an image, right? The image that people actually manifest in their lives is, again, based on the choices they make. Based on the choices they make. And in a Saturn time in general, right, that's any Saturn, any doing anything, right, is reality catches up with us for better or for worse. So when we're talking about the biopsychic script and the Saturn return, we're saying it's a major phase in life, right, around the idea of reality catching up. So we know we're in a reality catching up, but to me, the progressions are going to give us more information about what reality is showing up than anything else. So for me, Saturn return, where it tells us when to look at the progressions. And the information conveyed by the Saturn aspect / the Saturn return is that this is a maturation process, and part of maturation mean in order for us to mature, we have to deal with reality, right, and come up with a plan, right, on how to deal with it. Right? But also, I find that the second Saturn return, again, in astrology, people tend to think of it as negative, but oftentimes, people get lifetime achievement awards.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah. But I'm talking about the physical manifestation, right? Would be a lifetime achievement award.
Right.
That's a Saturn event.
Mm-hmm.
But also is getting old, getting sick. Right. That's also a Saturn event.
Right.
Especially second Saturn return event. Right. And it doesn't have to be a negative thing, but it's just this, starts to dawn on us that, right, that we're getting closer to not having a body anymore, right? And the body's had a lot of wear and tear, right? Based off of, right, situations we put ourselves in. So, right, and even that having that difficult conversation, right? I imagine the person who hits 60 and they, right, instead of accepting that they're 60, they're trying to be 40. Right. Again, if a strong Saturn, someone is constantly thinking about what could go wrong. And you need those kinds of people, right? Right. That's how you know what to plan for. Right. The function that helps us be good planners is we're planning for what we perceive could go wrong. That's why when I'm talking about Saturn to someone, to bring it down to earth, I talk about baby proofing a house. That's a positive Saturn. And it's a beautiful way to tell the story, because the reason we're baby proofing the house is because baby doesn't have enough experience / maturity to know what can hurt them or not. But as soon as baby starts having experiences and starts maturing, right, I can let up on the baby proofing. And if I kept things in place too long when baby had matured past it, it would actually stunt baby's growth. maybe wouldn't have confidence in their ability to overcome simple things because that was the message I sent them, right? They're telling me they can go down the steps, but I don't think so. I'm afraid. And so I say, no, you can't go down the steps by yourself until you're 7, right? But later in life, whenever they want to do something, right, they think they're not ready. We touched the surface, but I'm glad we spent some time appreciating Saturn times. I think, one of the ways that I suggest to think about transits and progressions is thinking about Mars times, Venus times, Mercury times, Saturn times, because there's a lot of ways that a Saturn time can show up in a chart, but they're all gonna be characteristic of Saturn. And as we understand that we have that general appreciation, we'll always have in our back pocket something useful, insightful to share with someone about how to manage a Mars time or a Saturn time or a Venus time. Right? And this idea of a Mars time, a Venus time, this is the same concept of thinking about the seasons, right? It's a time to plant, it's a time to harvest, it's a time to work hard, it's a time to spend time with my family, right? It's the same thing. And I suggest you think about it that way. So, right, someone going through a Saturn time, it's an opportunity, right, to mature, but you got to go through the maturation process, right? A Mars time to overcome obstacles, but you got to identify the obstacles and contact the part of yourself that has the courage and the passion to overcome them, right? The universe will be pushing you in that direction, right? You can help by looking for it, right? Typically makes it easier. Doesn't have to kick the door down, just open. Hey, welcome. Come on in. Been waiting for you. A Mercury time, right? Time to learn something. I learned to code during strong Mercury stimulus. I was up late at night, watching YouTube videos, trying to code, right? And if it's a hard aspect, right, learn something that's hard to learn. Ooh, good use of that energy. Take it out on the books. All right, cool. Well, you guys have a wonderful evening, and see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you.